And so not only is calcium regulated by hormones and your nutrition and lifestyle, but it's necessary to maintain calcium levels in the bone. Otherwise, dysfunction can happen. And so that's called calcium homeostasis. Your bones are a major storage site for calcium in the body. And so if we have hypocalcemia, which is a condition characterized by abnormally low levels of calcium, we can have adverse effects on a number of different body systems like circulation, your muscles, nerves, bone. Without adequate calcium, the blood has difficulty coagulating. Your heart could skip beats or stop beating altogether because calcium is absolutely crucial for a regular heartbeat. Your muscles will have difficulty contracting since calcium is needed there. Your nerves can have difficulty functioning since calcium is a major secondary messenger. And your bones become brittle because calcium makes up of that matrix. And so the causes of hypocalcemia can range from different hormonal imbalances and or an improper diet. And treatments can vary according to the cause, but prognoses are generally good. And then on the other hand, hypercalcemia, a condition characterized by abnormally high levels of calcium, makes the nervous system to be underactive. And this typically results in like lethargy or sluggish reflexes, constipation, loss of appetite, and in really bad cases, coma. And so, like I said, like calcium needs to have this fine balance, and it's regulated by osteoblast and osteoclast activity. So when calcium moves into bone, as osteoblasts build new bone, calcium is removed from bone as osteoclasts remove it. When osteoclast and osteoblast activity is balanced, the movement of calcium in and out of the bone is equal. But that's not always the case. So since calcium is critical for many bodily functions, it has to be regulated. We have to regulate osteoclast and osteoblast activity, otherwise dysfunction can occur. And so the regulation of chemical levels in the body typically involve hormones, which upon stimulation of their effector will cause a change or effect. A perfect example of this can be seen in the regulation of calcium. When we have too much calcium, we enter hypercalcemia, which results in the nervous system being underactive. And if we have too little calcium, we enter hypocalcemia, which ends up being an adverse effect on, again, a number of different body systems. So obviously calcium homeostasis is critical, and multiple body systems will play a role in maintaining this normal calcium level, such as the skeletal system, your endocrine system, and your digestive system, and also the kidneys. So calcium is a chemical element that cannot be produced by any biological processes. The only way it can enter the body is through diet, and the bones act as that storage site for calcium. The body deposits calcium in the bones when blood levels get too high, and it releases calcium from the bones when blood levels drop too low. This process is regulated by PTH, parathyroid hormone, also vitamin D and calcitonin. Cells of the parathyroid gland have plasma membrane receptors for calcium. When calcium is not binding to these receptors, the cells release parathyroid hormone, PTH, which stimulates osteoclast activity to release calcium from bone. And this demineralization process releases calcium into the blood. Well, parathyroid hormone also promotes reabsorption of calcium from the urine by the kidneys, so calcium can return from the urine to the blood. And also, finally, parathyroid hormone stimulates synthesis of vitamin D, and that in turn will stimulate calcium absorption from any digested food in the small intestine. This increases your calcium level in your blood, right here. And so when all these processes return blood calcium levels to normal, there's enough calcium to bind with the receptors of the parathyroid gland. And so then it stops releasing parathyroid hormone, and then we're back at homeostasis. We're back at our happy equilibrium. Well, on the other hand of things, when blood levels get too high, the thyroid gland will sense that and stimulate the release of calcitonin. And that inhibits osteoclast activity, and it stimulates calcium uptake by the bones, and it also decreases reabsorption of calcium by the kidneys. All of these actions will lower the blood calcium levels and return us back to a homeostasis again. And when blood calcium levels return to normal, the thyroid gland again. So in general, when we see calcium being too low, parathyroid hormone will be secreted and calcium in the blood will increase. And when calcium is too high, we'll see calcitonin released, and that will bring calcium levels down. So you don't have to memorize all the different steps of this. Just understand that when calcium levels are too low, parathyroid hormone will help bring them back up. And when calcium levels are too high, calcitonin will help bring them back down. Okay, so now we can talk about what happens when bones break. So there are 4 different steps that will happen here. When a bone breaks, blood flows from any vessel that is torn by the fracture, and those vessels could be in the periosteum, in the osteons, or even in the medullary cavity, and the blood begins to clot, and after 6 or 7 hours, the clot begins to form a hematoma. So hematoma forms. About 48 hours after the fracture, chondrocytes, the cartilage cells, have created an internal callus, which was secreting a fibrocartilaginous matrix between the 2 ends of the broken bone, and then they also create an external callus, and that's hyaline cartilage in the bone around the outside of the break, and this helps stabilize the fracture. So internal and external calli form. Okay, and the third aspect is over the next several weeks, osteoclasts resorb the dead bone that's floating around. Osteogenic cells become active, divide, and differentiate into osteoblasts, and the cartilage in the calli is replaced by spongy bone to form a spongy callus. So a bony callus forms, spongy bone callus. And then the spongy callus is replaced by compact bone on the outside, completing the healing process. Okay, so that spongy bone still remains on the inside, and the compact bone heals it on the outside. So that's bone remodeling. So you just need to understand these 4 steps in bone repair when a fracture occurs. And so lastly, we can talk about what happens to the skeletal system as we age. So as we age, your bone mass decreases due to a declining number of osteoblasts as we age, because we're running out of stem cells, so we're running out of osteoblasts. We also lose collagen in our bones, so they become less flexible and prone to fractures. As bone mass is lost, your teeth will fall out of their supportive bony collar, and to preserve your bone, you need to get proper amounts of calcium. A stooped posture will also occur due to compression fractures in your spine. And what we'll see is, as we age, osteoporosis will occur, and this is what's happening when osteoclast activity is higher than osteoblast activity. Women will lose about 1/2 of their spongy bone, while men will lose about 1/4 of their spongy bone. And your bone mass is about 60% genetic and 40% lifestyle. So there's a decent chunk that you can control by having a certain level of calcium in your diet, as well as having exercise and promoting bone growth by making sure that you're moving your body. And then you can prevent it with either eating calcium, taking vitamin D to make sure the calcium is absorbed in your intestines, as well as making sure you're doing weight-bearing exercises to keep those bones active, I guess. But that sums up our lecture material on the skeletal system, and